I mean, I don't think this is a shock to many, especially those who are Richmond fans, but honestly, it becomes another burden to an off-season that already has had a ton of injuries for the Tigers. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Dion Prestia has basically had his annual off-season injury, to put it, I guess, the best way. But instead of it being just a hamstring like he seems to always do, it's actually far more serious, with Dion Prestia hurting his Achilles. Now, again, before we do get into Richmond, how it affects them, and when I think Prestia will be back and whatnot, Richmond did actually put out a little bit of news and information to do with this by saying that Richmond midfielder Dion Prestia will likely miss the early rounds of the 2025 AFL season due to an Achilles issue. Now, first of all, that opening literal title and sentence right there already gives you pretty much everything you need to know about this. Again, first of all, Dion Prestia, the reason they say he will miss the opening rounds is because when an older player like Dion Prestia does an injury like an Achilles, and he's already had a ton of other injuries right there, basically Richmond are saying this into the point where they can't actually pinpoint when he will be back. And there is every chance, unfortunately, with Dion Prestia and how he is as a player and how many injuries this guy has literally sustained, that he does this again. So even though early rounds to most would think that this could be him getting ready for opening round, or, I know Richmond don't play opening round, but getting ready for that time period, or is he getting ready for round one, maybe round two at the latest. But I genuinely fear, by them saying opening rounds, again, that could be like anywhere to like round 5 or 6, and that's even if Dion Prestia comes back right. I remember when Dion Prestia, literally like last season, there were times where, and other previous seasons as well, he would be out for like 3 weeks with a hamstring injury, and it would somehow keep getting pushed back to 4 to 5 to 6. It's a very, very common thing, and it's a big issue for the Tigers. It says Richmond high performance manager Ben Serple said that the injury flared up at training last week. He goes on to say, unfortunately, Dion has an Achilles issue that will require a rehabilitation phase over the coming weeks, he added. Dion has completed a solid amount of work across the preseason up to this point and got himself into excellent condition. However, we will now need to take some time to focus on getting his Achilles right, which will likely rule him out for the early rounds of selection. Richmond's season opener is March 13. So we're going to know he didn't rupture his Achilles, but when you think about that, anyone who hurts their Achilles, especially enough for Richmond to say that he's going to be out for the opening stages of 2025, anytime that's said, I feel like it's a bigger issue than what we actually think it legitimately is. And honestly, with how Dion Prestia's injury issues and history are, as I just mentioned before, I don't expect Dion Prestia to be back in like an opening round to round 2 phase. I just genuinely don't. I might be being a negative Nelly here, but as a Richmond fan who has seen Dion Prestia get injured time and time again and have countless delays on his injuries, I'm just saying, don't be surprised, in my opinion, if this is around 5 or 6 delay. And this sucks for Richmond. Like, I know some people out there might genuinely be like, well, he's always injured anyway, this doesn't really affect the Tigers that much, but in my opinion, this actually affects the Tigers more than you would think. And the reason I say that is because, as we know, Richmond lost a ton of leadership and veteran experience in the last year's off-season. They, of course, lost Marlon Pickett, a guy in his 30s who had pretty much played nearly 100 games for the Tigers. Again, Dylan Grimes, a literal captain of the Richmond Football Club who played over 200 games. They traded away a ton of players in their primes who were becoming great leaders of the club, like Liam Baker, Jack Graham, and less and more of an extent of leadership in Daniel Rioli and of course, Shea Bolton. And then obviously the big one, I mean, Dustin Martin, you lost too. Even though he wasn't publicly a leader, again, behind closed doors, he was said to be a massive leader for the Richmond Football Club. Again, the greatest Richmond player of all time, over 300 games for the Tigers. You literally lose so much of that experience and more. Even a guy like Sam Naismith, who would have helped out on that side of things. Richmond really went into 2025 now with a decent amount of leadership, I want to say. Like, much more than rebuilding teams like North Melbourne and whatnot have had. But, again, a lot of players who are still going to the end of their career, and players who are strong leaders like Prestia and Lynch, who are continuously injured. So I think the Tigers were really hoping and praying that these type of players were really going to play consistent football, to play with these younger guys, to play with the 8 draftees that they brought in. Again, don't get me wrong, the Tigers knew Prestia was probably going to do a hammy and be out like 4 or 5 weeks. That always happens, but I don't think they expected him to do an Achilles injury like this, which, again, touch wood, it doesn't, could furthermore lead on to more consequences on Dion Prestia, which just sucks. It really, really does. And as I said, losing a guy as experienced as Dion Prestia, who was supposed to play early rounds with potential debuts of like players like Sam Lawler, Josh Smiley, Harry Armstrong, Jonty Fall, a Jasper Olga, a Campbell Gray, a Liam Fawcett, even players like Jacob Blight, who are only like 2 games into their career. A lot of these guys would have absolutely loved and needed the leadership of a guy like Dion Prestia. But the fact is, I just have a really worrisome feeling now with this injury in particular that Prestia might not play much football, at all. And he might not even be on the training track much at all. And again, most of the leadership he's now going to be providing is just going to be in the locker room. And it really does suck. Again, I've also seen Richmond fans personally attack the club and say that Prestia should have been amongst the players who retired last year and he should have been, number 5 on the retirement list. And a lot of people are saying that Prestia, he was never going to play much football this year. He's probably going to be injured 90% of it. When you could have had a young kid come in who's absolutely desperate for a spot, who could be a future player for Richmond, instead Dion Prestia has taken his spot. Again, there's been a lot of Richmond fans who have personally attacked the club and have said that. Look, I kind of agree and kind of disagree. I still think Prestia will make up for it with the leadership he'll still provide and all of the above. And there was still a 10% chance that Prestia could have had a healthy year. But yeah, now looking at Dion Prestia and him missing probably the first, I'm going to guess 5 to 6 rounds, and whoever knows how many more injuries he's going to have, it does make you wonder, God, there could have been, there were a lot of really, really good undrafted players in this year's class. Better than most classes, just because this year's draft was so stacked to the brim of players. A lot of those players who would have been, again, really desperate for that Richmond spot if it didn't go to Prestia. Again, it does kind of hurt, but also I stand by the club's decision to go down Prestia. I still think it was a good one. I'm just hoping, man, that he can get back from this Achilles injury okay and he can actually go and play some football, because at the moment I really, really don't know if he will really play that much at all this year. But again, if you haven't already, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for the latest AFL content news. Don't forget to comment your thoughts and opinions down below about Dion Prestia and his injury and whatnot. Do you guys think this is a really bad thing for the Tigers, or what do you guys think? Do you think it won't affect the Tigers that much? Again, I'd very much like to know. Again, subscribe to my gaming channel and my IRL/long channels. Links for them will be in the description down below. And I guess I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.